The Royals offense used a gaffe in the field by Toronto earlier tonight for a win. Do we feel like it could spark this offense moving forward? We'll find out next on this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener, of course, welcome in. We love new listeners here on the Locked On Royals channel. And if you want to know a little bit more about me, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB. I do some co-hosting there, some producing, and some hosting as well. So I stay pretty busy and up to date on the sports world. But when you come here, when you click on this link, you know that you were getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. And with this Locked On Podcast Network, I was going to give a good reminder that throughout the season and even into the offseason a little bit, we are always going to give you 5 episodes a week. Now, the reason I want to reiterate that is there are going to be episodes like tonight that don't come out until, probably 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning just because of working late or I have other stuff that I am tending to. But you're almost always going to get 5 episodes, even if that bleeds into the weekend. But it's not going to be too much of an issue moving forward this week. I should be able to get the third episode, I guess it would be this week. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be out there at Kauffman Stadium. So probably after that game, I'll get a third episode. But wanted to reiterate that even if it is during weird hours, untimely hours, I'm always going to find a way to get you guys 5 episodes a week, unless the connection like it did a month or 2 ago completely craps out on me and I'm just not able to do podcasts here in this podcasting room. But wanted to reiterate that so you guys aren't really worrying about, is there not going to be an episode tonight? I'm always going to get 5 episodes in. You'll just maybe have to watch it in the morning if you've already gone to bed. But it is a very good feeling Tuesday night / Wednesday morning, I guess you should say, as a Royals fan. They bounced back with a win in Game 2 against Toronto. And honestly, the way things were looking in the first 5 innings, it felt like it was going to be a repeat of the night before, where Toronto was just going to be able to get enough and the Royals offense wasn't going to be able to match that total. And in the end, they would have been chasing 2, 3, 4 runs all night long. And they were given an absolute gift. They were given a break in this game. And if it doesn't happen, the gaffe at first base, the Guerrero gaffe, as I tried to call it on Twitter, they don't win this game, at least not in my opinion. The way the bats had been swinging it, the way Gausman had kind of settled in, I did not see a world in which that play is made. It was Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, moving against his body. He was moving more towards second base, but flipped it onto first base. And I guess Vladdy Jr. just lost it in the lights or something, or didn't really see it off the release point. That was 100% catchable ball. He drops it, ball rolls away, run scores. And as we know, a few moments later, Bobby Witt Jr. has the go-ahead 2-run double down the left field line, making up for not being able to drive in a pair of runners earlier on in the game. But I thought about it a little bit. And you can look at this gaffe a few different ways. I mean, you could be pessimistic and say, well, this offense still isn't clicking. They needed an absolute miracle, literally a 1 in 100 chance of happening at the big league level of a guy just dropping a ball that is thrown directly to him, especially on a ground ball to a third baseman, throwing it to a first baseman. It wasn't like this was, lunging too far. It was in the dirt. It was too high. It was right there for Vladdy Jr. The other way you can take it is the optimistic way, is that this can spark you. And I think what we saw after the Royals got that 1 run, because Adam Frazier was thrown out in a contact play a little bit earlier on in that inning. And I think everybody had grown agitated. Seriously, can you not drive in runs when it just matters most? Can you not get a ball in the air? Can you not have a ground ball with eyes? Why is it so difficult for this offense to manufacture runs? And then you have this happen, and it almost looked like everybody that came up to the plate had this weight lifted off their shoulders. You could see these at-bats getting better with progression. You saw Maikel Garcia have a really good night tonight. He had 2 hits. He had a walk in which he saw 7 or 8 or maybe even 9 pitches. Really good game. He looked like the old Maikel Garcia. I thought Vinny, even though he went 0 for 4, had some really good at-bats. Bobby Witt Jr., some really good at-bats. Salvador Perez, really good at-bats. There were guys that were seeing pitches, working the count. And that was hard to do when they were pressing, and there felt like there was a lot of pressure. And we are going to see a young team have that pressure throughout the season. It's maybe fair or unfair to put a lot of expectation on a team that lost 106 games last year. But here they are at 14-10. And they've been hearing the noise about, well, are they only good because they played the White Sox 7 times in the month of April? I mean, they clearly can't beat these other teams that are good competition. But now you look at it, half their games or half their wins, I should say, are against good competition. They've got to win against Minnesota. They've got to win against Baltimore. They've got to win against New York. They've got to win against Toronto. They do have 3 wins against Houston, but Houston is 7-17. So how good are the Astros really going to be this year? I still hold out hope that they're going to be just fine. To me, though, this was one of those games where I feel like the pressure can fall off your shoulders a little bit. Because when you get a gift like that in the field, you feel like things are swinging your way again. I had been tweeted at earlier in this game of, did it feel like the Royals were just getting unlucky time and time and again? Like during this 3-game losing streak, the Blue Jays and the Orioles just had every little dribbler find the outfield grass. Every line drive would just barely tick off the glove. And when the Royals were hitting, they were smashing the ball and they couldn't drive in runs. And the way I wanted to answer it was, it feels unlucky because the Royals offense isn't doing anything. If the Royals offense was still putting up runs, I don't think it would look as unlucky. But when you're really pressing and you can see those players go up to the plate kind of tight, then you are going to feel like everything is going against you. But this was the epitome. This was the definition of having a break go your way. And maybe going into tomorrow, that pressure has come off their shoulders a little bit. And they really shouldn't have had immense pressure on a measly 3-game losing streak. Now, I think that's, maybe promoting that a little bit too highly. I don't feel like this was a do or die game, but it was a game I feel like they needed to grab just to get people back on their side a little bit, to get people going, okay, it's not as bad as it was. Because now what we're seeing, which we'll talk about in the second segment, the bullpen has seemed to iron out some things. The rotation, they're going through a little bit of a negative regression here, but I also don't think it's been disastrous. Like, if this is the negative regression, they're going to be just fine. Michael Wacha wasn't good really at all tonight, and he only gave up 2 runs over 4 1/3. I mean, that's not great for what you're paying him. He should be able to at least give you 5 innings, but he didn't go deep tonight. And he was fighting his command, and Toronto was seeing a lot of pitches and were being able to lay off the changeup a little bit. He got some really ugly swings on a few of those at-bats, but for the most part, it was a battle for him all night long. But Chris Stratton, John Schreiber, and James MacArthur were nails in the bullpen. And the offense, look, you got one big hit when it mattered. Bobby Witt Jr. had the 2-run double. Isbell's wasn't a hit. It was a gaff by Vladdy Jr. at first base. But you take it. You take any win in any way, shape, and form, you get it. You should never apologize for winning games at the big league level, regardless of what the competition looks like. And the competition this homestand has been, a significant step up. You saw Baltimore. Baltimore is one of the best teams in baseball. Toronto is a team that's neck and neck with you right now. In fact, you have 1 game on them in the standings if you're into April scoreboard watching. But so they're right there with Kansas City at this point in time. And also keep in mind, Cleveland's now 17-6. They have the best record in baseball by a lot. So a team in the Central is finding ways to try to, early on, create some serious separation in this division. The Royals and Tigers are both 14-10, so they're still right there. I mean, it's 3.5 games. And you'll see the Tigers this weekend. But it was important to at least grab this game because now, with Cole Reagan still to throw, Alec Marsh, who looked really good last time out, you grab one of these games, you're not complaining about a split. In fact, you're not complaining about a 3-4 homestand. It's not a winning homestand, but 3-4 is a hell of a lot better than 2-5 or 1-6. So they use a Gaffe tonight to grab a W. They snap the 3-game skid, and you got to feel pretty good about this team going into tomorrow night, in which Alec Marsh will be taking on Yariel Rodriguez in that game. I'll be out there at Kauffman Stadium covering the game, getting some post-game audio. So I'm sure we'll talk about that in tomorrow night's episode. Or I guess when this posts, it'd be tonight's episode, right? So I know it's a little bit more of a later episode, but I do apologize on that. I was running around doing some other things, but wanted to at least get this episode out before I go to bed tonight and do the same thing over later on today. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, this bullpen has seemingly found roles for guys, and they're starting to settle into those roles. How important can that be moving forward? We're going to talk about it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, I want to give a shout out to a couple of the sponsors today, starting with Game Time. Now, I mentioned before the break that I'll be going out there to Kauffman Stadium tomorrow, but I will have a media pass, so I'm not paying for a ticket. I'm not paying for parking. I'm not paying for concession food. But if you are thinking about going out to the game, go buy your tickets on Game Time, and we've got a code to use for you so you can get some cash off if you are one of those first-time users. But Game Time is the place I go to when I'm buying tickets for anything, whether it's a Royals game, it's a college game, it's a Chiefs game, it's a comedy show, it's a concert. They've got everything lined up for me. They make it incredibly easy to use. It's fun to use. You see the best deals, the cheapest deals, the bundle deals, whether you're going by yourself, you're going with multiple people. It's just so simple. And I almost, just for the fun of it sometimes, I just browse on there, see what's going on, see where I can buy tickets to, because it is an app that is just so well laid out, and they also just never screw you over. So I really suggest using Game Time. If you are going to the game tomorrow, you want to buy tickets, and if you've never used Game Time, it's the perfect time for me to promote this because you can get some money off with the code that we have. So here's what you need to do. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our code of LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB. Those terms apply, so all you need to do is create that account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We also want to give a shout-out to Policygenius today. They're one of our other sponsors in the show and a very proud sponsor of Locked On Royals. And Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million in coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click in the link in the description to get free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB. Well, tonight, one of the main reasons the Royals won this game was because the bullpen was nails. And it was, I would say, the three main culprits, Chris Stratton, John Schreiber, and James McArthur. James McArthur getting the 6-out save tonight. It was a thrilling final 3 innings, even though there wasn't much offense going on. In fact, no offense at all. You saw a lot of great pitching. You saw a lot of tight situations. You saw a lot of tightrope acts. And it's amazing how quickly we've changed our perception about the bullpen in just 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, think about that Baltimore series, the first one, I should say. We were wondering if the Royals would start making some moves. I thought that the Royals were still ways off of making any roster moves, of bolstering the bullpen. Like the guys they had brought in, they were not ditching. And I don't see them ditching them anytime soon. No, they feel like the guys they've assembled, the guys they have brought in, are going to be key pieces moving forward. They are going to be some of the main pieces for this team to stay competitive throughout the summer. And tonight, I think, was a really good example of it. Chris Stratton is not overpowering. Chris Stratton is not somebody that is going to wow you with some electrifying pitch. I think he's got a really good curveball. The spin rate is really good on it. He's got a lot of experience at the big league level. He's got postseason experience. That's all going to play. There are some people that are going to hold that Mets outing, to the death. They are going to death grip it. They are going to take it to the brink. They are going to hold on to that forever. But it was just one bad outing in which he got squeezed. Other than that, he was not very good on opening day, but he's been decent in my opinion. He's done his job. He's been exactly what I thought he would be, with maybe a little bit more of walk problems. But 4 of his 9 walks came in one outing when he was getting really squeezed at Citi Field in New York. Then I look at John Schreiber. John Schreiber has been incredibly underrated this year. He has been one of my favorite offseason pickups that we've seen perform for the 2024 Royals. He's been this fireman. He's been given a big responsibility of coming in some tough situations. He's had to come in on the road in one-run games. He had to keep games tied. And the only time he gave up a run this year was over the weekend on Saturday, and that wild thrill in which the Royals almost pulled off a comeback. But it was just one run. And he was one of those pieces that kind of had to work out immediately. You gave up one of your top prospects, or at least a top 20 prospect, to bring in a bullpen arm. And John Schreiber was not that good last year. But 2 years ago in Boston, he was doing exactly what he's doing right now. And that helps your bullpen tremendously, because you can rely on him to come in a one-run game, throw strikes, pitch to contact, get ground balls, and get out of it effortlessly. And then James McArthur has just emerged as this consistent, tough to square up back-end guy in the bullpen with tremendous movement. And I thought the way Q managed the bullpen tonight was exactly how you want your bullpen to be managed. So Chris Stratton comes in when Michael Walker loads the bases. He gets out of it only giving up 1 run. It was an inherited runner, so it's not like it counted against Chris Stratton's ERA. Then he goes out for another inning, clean inning of work after the Royals had taken the lead. Then instead of saving John Schreiber for maybe the 8th inning and going to Angel Serpa in the 7th, or going to, they wouldn't go to Nick Anderson in back-to-back days. They weren't going to Tyler Duffy. Maybe you could look at, you're not going to Matt Sauer. I don't really know who you go to outside of Angel Serpa in that spot in the 7th, but they go with John Schreiber because you were facing the middle of Toronto's order. So you wanted one of your best bullpen arms in that spot. And then you go to McArthur for the 8th and the 9th. He hadn't pitched in a while. He hadn't pitched since, I want to say, the White Sox series. It was over the road trip. I believe it was in game 1 of doubleheader. So he had a little bit in the tank to go multiple innings, and he picked up the 6-out save. That's what you want to see from your manager. That's very tactical, in my opinion. It's not always going to work out. There are going to be things that don't work in your favor. But the way the bullpen was handled tonight, I think, was very successful just on paper. Of course, it worked out, but I think if you would have given a sheet of paper to me and said, here's how it's going to go after the Royals had taken the lead, I would have signed up for it immediately. I think that would have been the best case scenario, and it did work out for the Royals. So in that type of spot, a one-run game, and you're hoping the offense can give you a little bit more cushion, we now see where the pecking order falls. Chris Stratton can be that 6th inning guy, that 7th inning guy. Schreiber is going to be the setup, and McArthur's the 9th inning guy. But if it goes like this, and Michael Walker or whatever starter can't go deep in the game, you can turn to somebody like Chris Stratton in the 4th inning or the 5th inning, and he can go multiple. Then you can turn it over to Schreiber when you're facing the toughest part of the lineup. And if McArthur needs to go multiple innings, he can do that. But you can't do that if your bullpen guys haven't settled into roles. And after all that kind of toying with it, the Royals have now put their bullpen guys into certain spots, and I think that's helping them for the long run. And when you get those guys settling in, you're going to have those really good stretches. And I think the Royals are in a good stretch right now with their relief pitching. I have not been disappointed since that Baltimore series. I think they had some really, really sharp outings, and they're piecing together a pretty good month when it's all said and done. Okay, we're going to move on to our final segment of the show. We are going to talk about an offensive hitter who we are very high on here, and we want to see succeed, and we feel like he's catching fire at the right time. Before we move on to that, talking some Maikel Garcia, of course, we're going to give a shout-out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports app that you can check out on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. That's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about Maikel Garcia and his recent hot stretch, or at least lukewarm stretch. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to the title sponsor today in one of the more downloaded mobile games out there in Monopoly Go. I don't know if you're a phone person or you like playing games. I, for one, love playing games on my phone, and I am a big Monopoly fan. So I love going with Monopoly Go and joining the ranks here, looking at the leaderboard, seeing where I match up among the rest of people playing in the world. But I'm going to tell you about Monopoly boards in this game. You would think, that Monopolies, you're going to have the board right in front of you. You're stuck to one thing. You can't really be too diverse with it. Well, that's quite the contrary with Monopoly Go. You can play in Vegas. You can play in Camelot. You can play on the moon. There's so many different ways that you can play, and you can check out where you stand on the leaderboard. You can see who's thriving. You can see who's failing, and that's what you want in the mobile game. I would have been fine just playing Monopoly, but the fact that you can play globally and see where everybody is stacking up, that's what makes it so fun. And it's not just me being competitive. I am a competitive person. I just like playing, at work when I've got some downtime on a lunch break, and you get to play, just off and on whenever you want to. And if you are a big Monopoly fan, I really think you're going to love Monopoly Go. So go get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go. It's now free on the App Store or on Google Play. Strongly suggested here, coming from the Locked On Royals channel. Last thing I want to dive into today is jumping over to the offensive side of things. We know this group has been in a rut. We know this lineup has seen a lot of, inconsistent play. They'll have their boom games where they can tack on 8 runs or 9 runs in 2 innings. And there's also going to be times like Sunday and times like Monday night where they just can't really get much going at all. And guys are flailing at the plate. They're not really having professional at-bats. They're not moving runners over. They're not driving guys in when they're in scoring position. All of that gets frustrating. But I think there's a direct correlation to all of the struggles. And it's very simple. I don't think you need to dive into some advanced data. And I am a data person. I'm an analytics person. Not, to the death. I think that there's still a lot of eye test stuff in baseball, and you can't win games, by just purely analytics. I think you need to have a good feel for the game, and you need to have a good eye for the game. But this one was always simple to me, that the Royals offense over the last week and a half had been carried by Salvador Perez and Vinny Pasquantino. 2 guys that got off to very slow starts to begin the year. Salvy's only lasted about 2 games. Vinny's lasted about, anywhere from 8 to 9 to 10 games. And now both those guys are doing just fine. And they were carrying the offense for the better part of a week and a half. Bobby Witt Jr. was playing well, but he wasn't really doing what he had done in the first couple games, first couple series of the season. And then we saw Maikel Garcia, MJ Melendez, and Kyle Isbell go into a tailspin. So the simple part of this, what you can easily go back to is, well, when you are just having your 2 power hitters succeed, well, who's getting on for them? Who are the guys that are supposed to be getting on for them? That's Maikel Garcia and Bobby Witt Jr. Maikel Garcia wasn't getting on base at all. He was 0 for on the road trip. and then even kind of struggled at the very beginning of the homestand that began with Baltimore on Friday night. But when you see these young hitters hit their stride, finally get that hit they've been waiting for, they barrel a ball and it actually finds the outfield grass. It leaves the yard. It two-hops the wall. It's ripped the other way. You can see the at-bats just get better and better and better. And we talked with Maikel Garcia on Monday night, and he said that his home run felt really good, and he kind of slammed his bat down after he'd hit it, and he said that was frustration. He had felt that frustration. And I think young hitters are always going to deal with that. You're like, man, I'm squaring it up a couple times, and it's still finding the gloves out there. And then you tense up a little bit because you see that 0 for turn from 0 for 6 to 0 for 10 to 0 for 15 to 0 for 20. And when you get to 0 for 20, you're just begging for a hit at that point. You are hoping and praying that just something falls because everybody knows that you had gone ice cold. Everybody had seen that you were pressing. And for Maikel Garcia, what was fascinating to me in this game was that he rips the 108-mile-an-hour single in the first inning. And then he has that bloop single that I believe became the hit that moved Kyle Isbell to third, and then Garcia eventually scored on the 2-run double. But you saw in one of his final at-bats, he worked a 7 or 8 or 9 pitch walk. And that was his best at-bat that he's had in 2 weeks. You could tell how much more comfortable and how much more confident he was at the plate because he wasn't concerned with the bad stretch. He wasn't concerned with the 0 for streak. He had barreled the ball really well the night before. He had homered over the bullpen in left field. He had ripped a single to left. Now he has soft contact, and that finds the outfield grass. And now he's going, I'm looking for what I know I can crush at the plate. Rather than, well, I hope I get a pitch to hit. I hope I get a pitch that I like. Now it's, I know what I want, and I'm going to wait until I see that pitch. When young players get that confidence, it can be dangerous in a good way to a lineup. And the Royals have a couple of guys slumping right now. It seems like it's passing on from guy to guy. Right? You have Vinny Pasquantino on a slump. Then he handed it to Maikel Garcia, who handed it to MJ Melendez, who's now handed it to Nelson Velasquez, and Kyle Isbell's also in there. There were guys that were just simply struggling. And that can be something that brings down an entire offense. But I believe if Garcia starts catching fire, Bobby Witt Jr. is going to do so, and you hope that Vinny stays hot and Salvi stays hot, and then somebody like an MJ Melendez or a Nelson Velasquez gets back to where they need to be. Because if over half of your lineup is producing at a high level, you're going to be just fine. You hope to get something from the bottom 3, and I feel like from time to time they can get that. But I think I'd start up top. And right now it's a good sign that you're seeing that confidence slowly work its way back. And those professional at-bats are slowly becoming more and more apparent in this homestand for Maikel Garcia. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always follow me on Twitter X at JohnnyJ_15. And you can find us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Well, tomorrow I'm going to be out there at the game at Kauffman Stadium, again, covering that game, getting some post-game audio. So our episode probably won't be until later on in the evening. Won't be as late as tonight's episode, today's early morning episode, but it will be a little bit later on because I'll have a lot of work stuff to get done. But not to worry, I have plenty of thoughts on what happens between Alec March and Yariel Rodriguez in that Game 3 matchup between the Blue Jays and the Royals. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.